everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so happy to have you guys here tonight. My name is McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore, and I want to just say a big thank you. Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore in Denver, Colorado. We have 4 locations in the Denver metro area, and we are turning 50 this year, 50, which is an amazing feat for a bookstore. And the reason that we're able to do that is because of you guys. You guys are the ones, the community members who shop local, support local bookstores and local businesses. And so thank you for having us make it to our 50th year, and here's to the next 50. You're also the reason that we get to have these amazing events that we have here. Normally when we're in person, we can all gather in a room, listen to an author talk, get our book signed, greet one another. But this way, in this global pandemic that we have right now, we're having to do it virtually. So thank you for being a part of our virtual community. You guys are already amazingly active in the chat. Thank you for doing that. That is what you will use to ask questions of our author and our moderator later in the event tonight. So keep that up. I love seeing where everybody's from. It's quite an array of people. So thank you again for being a part of that community. I want to also let you know that if you are in the Denver metro area, you can come visit Tattered Cover Bookstore, any of our 4 locations. We're open 7 days a week at each of our stores. As long as you come in wearing your mask over your mouth and your nose, you can come in, join us, and browse for about 90 minutes or so. But if you're like me and you don't want to make the drive, or you just want to shop in your pajamas, you can always order online at tatteredcover.com. That is open 24/7. And so I want to just let you guys know that, so you can get your books ahead of time, including the one that we're talking about tonight. Also, closed captioning is enabled for those who might need it. The way to do that is there's a black bar at the bottom of the screen you're watching me on right now. There's a button labeled CC on it, and you're going to click that button, and closed captioning is enabled if you want it or need it. Finally, we have several upcoming events. Tomorrow, we have fiction author Catherine Siegelman, which is the 13th dates. What are dates? It's the 11th. I know how to do things. Sorry, we have Catherine Siegelman tomorrow, the 11th. But one that you nonfiction nature readers might be interested in is Eric Raschke and his new book, To the Mountain, and that's going to be on February 19th. But I want to talk about the author that we have here tonight, who is an expert in his field and is a wonderful storyteller. We're so excited to have him tonight. He's going to be in conversation with Dalia Malone of the Sierra Club, the Colorado chapter. And we're talking, of course, about Rick McIntyre. He spent more than 50 years watching wolves in America's national parks, 25 of those years in Yellowstone, where he's accumulated over 100,000 wolf sightings. He's spoken about the Yellowstone wolves with 60 Minutes, NPR, and CBC, among other media outlets. He lives in Silvergate, Montana, and we're here talking about his latest book, The Reign of Wolf 21. And so now it's my honor to welcome both Dalia and Rick, and we're going to have them turn on their microphones and their videos. Here we go. And there they are. Hi, both of you. Looks like you're still muted.
Hello.
There's Dalia. Hello. Rick.
And can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Yay. I'm going to hop off and let the 2 of you chat and talk as the experts that you are. But keep you in mind, viewers, that we are going to be doing a Q&A session later. So keep those questions and you can write those in the chat. All right, take it away, you 2.
Thank you so much, McKaylee. Rick, it is an honor and a delight to actually meet you in person, as close in person as we can possibly be. I wanted to jump right in and say that one of my very favorite passages in the book is your reinterpretation of a famous quote by Rudyard Kipling, where he says, "For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack." Your reinterpretation of that is that the wolf takes care of the pack, and the pack takes care of the wolf. For me, this phrase defines the relationship between 21 and 42 and the success of their life together. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, thank you. That's really an appropriate way to begin our conversation. For those of you that have read the book, that section is paired with one of the most dramatic episodes I've ever seen involving wolves. As many of you folks know, in Yellowstone, where there's no human hunting or trapping, the most common cause of death for a wild wolf is to be killed by a rival pack. And our main character today, number 21, excuse me for a second, he was essentially the undisputed heavyweight champion of, I'll say, the known world as far as he was concerned. Never lost a fight, but it never killed a defeated opponent. And the episode that caused me to think about the Kipling quote took place in the Hellroaring Creek area, where it was just 21, his longtime mate 42, and a pup. They were attacked by a different pack that had that territory. I think the other wolves numbered 7, so it was 7 against 3. And pretty much single-handedly, 21 was fighting the other wolves off to protect his family. And he really was invincible in battle. But later, after he had won the fight, 42 had moved off somewhere. I lost sight of her. The wolves came back. They charged at 21, who now just had the pup with them. And I think probably correctly, he changed his strategy. He needed to make sure the pup was safe. So the pup panicked. It ran downhill, and 21, to stay with it, he needed to run with it. So he ran behind it with the 7 rival wolves chasing him. The pup got away, but the 7 wolves jumped him, pinned him. They had him on the ground, was attacking him. He was fighting back, but even for 21, those were pretty bad odds. So it looked like I was finally going to witness the demise, the death of the great champion. And then out of nowhere, a rescue party ran in, led by Wolf 42. I think there were 12 other Druid wolves in the rescue party. They charged in, they chased off the other wolves, but I could no longer see 21. He just had vanished. I looked for him, couldn't find him. I felt maybe he had been mortally wounded, had crawled away. Eventually, I found 42. She was resting comfortably, peacefully. And then I saw standing right next to her was 21. And he was completely unfazed about the whole situation. It was just one more day at work for him. Didn't matter what those details were. So the Kipling quote comes in that there were many, many times in previous years where 21 had pretty much single-handedly protected the family. He was their defender. He was their champion. And then on this particular day, when he needed help the most, it was the rest of the pack that saved him. So that quote, the wolf is the strength of the pack, that certainly described 21. But in this case, he needed help. And so the pack is the strength of the wolf.
That was a fabulous description. It was such a exciting, moving event in the book, but it seems that throughout, that theme of cooperation is really kind of a hallmark of not just 21, but of 21 and 42 and of the whole family. And there's so many examples of that. Another wolf in the family was 253. And so 253 was quite different, but he was part of that family and that cooperation. And I was wondering if you could just give us a brief glimpse into his, 253 had kind of a rough go of it, but he did some extraordinary things, like he took a little jaunt, a little walkabout down to Utah. And maybe you could guide us through that a little bit.
Sure. 253 in many ways deserves a book of his own. I write about the rest of his life in my next book, which will be called The Redemption of Wolf 302. So some of the folks in the meeting here may be a little bit familiar with his story because it was a big story in the papers. He was the first wolf to come into Utah, I believe, in 75 years. So he left the Druid Peak family in Lamar Valley, traveled to the eastern part of Utah. We believe he was traveling with a female that he had just met. So perhaps if things had worked out differently, they would have settled in Utah, would have had pups, would have been the first pack there in many, many decades. But it appeared that not long after he met that female, he stepped into a coyote trap and he couldn't get out of it. The trapper came on the scene. He saw that it was a black wolf in the trap rather than a coyote, and he did exactly the right thing. He deserves a lot of credit for his decisions. He called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They sent a biologist. They saved the wolf. They took him out of the trap. They treated his wounded paw, and they let him go near the south entrance of Yellowstone. He had previously injured a hind leg. This was now an injured front foot. So he traveled all the way through Yellowstone, essentially only on two good legs, and made it back to his family. So we have great, great admiration for him. He stayed with the Druid wolves for many years, had many great adventures, was one of the best wolves we've ever had, and then left home once again, and this time headed down toward the Tetons, found a female there, and established a wolf population there. So he has a great story.
He does have a great story, but you mentioned another fella, 302. And in my reading of The Reign of 21, 302 in my mind was a little bit of a Romeo, and kind of very much the opposite of 21. So as far as I know now, I haven't heard the rest of the story of 302, but he kind of had a personality very much different, very different character than 21. And so I'm kind of fascinated that he turns different later on in his life. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about why I think 302 was a little bit of a Romeo. Kind of had the girls, definitely they liked him, and so but he wasn't a family guy necessarily, at least as far as I know.
Well, it may be that some of us here in the meeting, especially the women, may have run into guys over the course of their life that were totally untrustworthy. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, well, yes.
Once.
Just once, right?
He, by any standard, he really was a gorgeous wolf. He was just drop dead gorgeous. And he showed up in early 2003 during the mating season in Lamar Valley. 21 had a lot of daughters that year. And boy, they just all flocked to him. He was, whatever you want to say, the Brad Pitt of wolves, Leonardo DiCaprio of wolves, pick your choice. And he got several of them pregnant. It looked like he was going to do the traditional thing of a dispersing wolf that is mated with some unrelated females in the sense of forming a new pack. So everything looked like it was going to work out fine. And then on the same day, twice, rival wolves charged at his little group. And he took one look at those wolves coming at him, glanced over at his pregnant girlfriend, and abandoned them and ran away twice in one day. So that was the proof that 302 was nothing like his uncle 21. He was actually the very opposite. So he had this track record of getting females pregnant and abandoning them. And that spring, when 21's daughters had pups that had been sired by 302, 21, as the alpha male, did the right thing. He raised 302's pups alongside his own pups, and as far as we could see, did not treat them any differently. So that was our beginning of learning a little bit about 302. I'll just say a little bit more, and then maybe we can get back to 21. But 302, after 21 passed away years later, did join the Druid pack, For a short period, he actually was the alpha male, but was no good at it. He kept on running away. So his nephew, who had come with him, had to take over. And he proved to be a great alpha male in the mold of 21. But to give everyone a taste of what the next book is going to be like, as a very old guy, 302 actually turned his life around and became very trustworthy, stable, and reliable. So his story was totally different than 21. And it just goes to show, like people, like dogs, wolves have different personalities and even different characters in the sense of what their behavior patterns are like. He became a classic alpha male at the very end of his life.
So I guess old guys really can change.
Yeah, they they tell him about it. And maybe one more thing to add to that. There were so many times where 21 caught 302 and could have killed him, but he just couldn't. And so at the very end of the 302 book, there's a symmetry. And I don't really want to say too much to spoil the story, but what I'll just mention is that he became a hero at the end, and that involved saving some descendants of 21 from being killed. So in a sense, 302 returned the favor to 21.
So all you gals out there that are looking for an old guy and you think, oh my goodness, no, there's no way, he's entrenched in his ways, there is hope. And it can change. So back to 21 and 42, because I think they were pretty much part of the same story. For me anyway, what resonated throughout the entire book was that the story of 21 and of 42 was truly a love story. How their love for each other, and not just for each other, but for their entire family, enabled them to meet the amazing challenges, to overcome incredible hurdles and barriers to survival, was really exemplified throughout this whole book by the loyalty that 21 had for 42 and his whole family. And I was hoping that you could just maybe delve into a few examples. There's so many of that loyalty that 21 had and was so demonstrative of.
Well, there's so much to say in that. I guess I'll begin when 21 joined the pack. So he, when he was 2.5 years old, a young adult male, left his family, wandered into the adjacent wolf pack territory, the Druid wolves, who actually were a rival pack to his family. They had fought in the past, so it was a dangerous thing for him to do that. But 21 always had good timing. And I'm not sure if he was aware of it, but their alpha male, Wolf 38, had just been illegally shot and killed outside the park. So when 21 walked into that territory as a lone wolf, essentially into enemy territory, there was no alpha male. There was an alpha female, 39, and then she had 3 adult daughters, 40, 41, and 42. So 4 adult females, and then several female pups, a few male pups. And within an hour of them first seeing 21 in their territory, they had invited him into the pack. They'd all made friends with him. He was the alpha male inside of just 60 minutes. And the problem that he had then was maybe too much female attention. So 4 adult females that with the coming breeding season would have all been vying for his attention. And it very quickly developed into an even more complicated situation. So one of the adult daughters, 40, who is gray, she had a very domineering, very violent personality, just like people. Wolves can vary in their demeanor and personality. And so she was probably borderline psychotic. She drove her own mother out of the family and then drove one of her 2 sisters, 41, out of the family. And then over the next couple of years, relentlessly beat up and went after her remaining sister, 42, who had a very opposite personality. She wanted to get along with everyone. She wanted everyone to cooperate. And that was exactly the same as 21's personality. So you could see that 21 and 42, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, were meant for each other. But you may know that male wolves are very, very respectful of females. They really never use force against a female in their family. So 21 was really stymied in knowing what to do about 40. He just could not bring himself to intervene in the situation. And we believe for 2 springs in a row, 40 did the worst thing imaginable to her sister. We believe that 2 springs in a row, she killed all of 42's pups. And then everything came to a head the following spring. 42 by that time had made an alliance with the younger females in the family. She had treated them well. She'd done a lot of favors for them. They were very supportive of each other. 42 made a smart move. She denned about 5 miles away from her sister. And then late one day, we saw 40 marching toward 42's den. It was in the trees. We couldn't see what was happening. It was at the end of the day. But we assumed that her intent would be for the third time to kill 42's pups. I came out early the next morning, got signals from both sisters. 40 was especially loud. And then someone told me that there was a wounded wolf nearby. We looked, and only a few feet from the road was a wolf just drenched in blood, covered with wolf bites. And it was Wolf 40. And she died probably within an hour of us finding her. And when we examined her after her death, we saw that her body was just covered every inch with wolf bites, way more than one wolf could have inflicted on her. So I think what happened was she did go to 42's den. She probably grabbed one of her pups and was getting ready to crunch it. And for the first time, 42 finally stood up to her sister. But for 42 to try to defeat her sister, she just did not have that mean streak in her. But what must have happened were her female allies jumped in on her side. So it was perhaps 3 against 1. And that's what won the fight for 42's sight. They did not finish her off. They did not kill her, but they wounded her, not that she died later. And then the next part of the story, which is maybe even more emotional, was 21 marched over from 40's den to 42's site, got her, brought her back the 5 miles to 40's den. I think with the intent of showing her 40's pups, who would have been crying out to be nursed. 21 couldn't do anything about that. But when we realized what was happening, we were very concerned because 42 certainly would feel justified in killing her sister's pups. 40 had done that to her litters twice. And if she had spared their life, what if one or more of them grew up with the same personality as their mother? That was all happening in a forest, whatever was going on. So we just didn't know what was happening. It turned out that there was another mother wolf. She got that mother to bring her pups there. 42 carried her pups one by one to what I'm going to call the central den. She reorganized the whole pack, so it was much easier for 21 to go out and hunt and bring back food. And it took us about a month of watching the den every day. And then finally, we saw the 2 mother wolves walk through an opening in the trees, and marching behind them in single file were a lot of pups. An average litter in Yellowstone is 6. By the time the 2 mothers and every pup made it to the other side, we had a count of 21 pups. So that was the proof that all 3 litters had survived. She had saved the life of her sister's pups and had raised them just like they were her own. And all 21 survived. No, I think 20 survived to the end of the year, whereas during 40's reign, the survival rate of her pups was way lower. So 42's gift was organization, getting everyone to work together. I once thought that if she had been born a woman, she could have been designated the, what was the term at the World War II, the Supreme Allied Commander. She could have been the one that organized the D-Day invasion and probably would have done a better job than Eisenhower.
Well, it's the loyalty, and what strikes me is the love and the cooperation was so much different between 42 and then 40. 21 had his hands full though, with 20
Well,
or 21 pups.
yes, but I think from his perspective, that was the easy part. The hard part for him was he had no idea how to deal with 40 or all the squabbling among the females in his family. He was helpless in that area. He was the master at hunting, the master at defending his family. So that stuff was easy for him. Getting everyone to work together and cooperate and not having any squabbling. He needed 42 to help him on that. So his life was just so easy from that point on. I don't think he had many cares in his life after that moment.
So, given that 21 and 42 went through this amazing life together, and you had this amazing joy of being able to watch them and watch this story unfold. After all these years, I need to ask you what you've learned, maybe what rather stated, what has 21 taught you about how to be a real man?
Well, that's a very profound question. Thank you for asking that. I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood where there are a lot of tough guys. And so I've been around people, men, boys, teenagers that feel they have something to prove and they're willing to use violence. I've been in those situations. But when I think of 21, if you first realize that he literally was invincible in battle, had never really lost a fight, several times by himself, pretty much could hold his own against 5, 6, or 7 wolves. I don't think that impressed him at all. That was just, okay, yeah, I can do that, but I can't do what 42 can do. So he had that as part of his life, but I think the example that comes to mind to relate to what you're asking was a time where a very aggressive pack known as Molly's Wolves came into Lamar Valley. They had a reputation for killing a lot of other wolves. And they charged at 21's family. The situation was that both packs were south of the Park Road near the Yellowstone Institute in Lamar Valley. And 21's family did exactly the right thing. The pups and the younger adults, they ran north toward the road. 42 was behind them, kind of making sure that all the pups were going the right way. And then last in line was 21, meaning he was the closest to the enemy wolves that were charging at them. And it seemed like he was concentrating on looking ahead of him. He had a clear view that everyone in the family was ahead of him, going in the right direction, had a run. And then he stopped and he turned around and he looked at the other wolves. And as far as I could tell from the angle, I was looking through a 60-power spotting scope. He was not in any way acting aggressive. He wasn't snarling. His hackles weren't up. He was just calmly standing there. And I'd say with all the confidence in the world, just looking at the other wolves charging at him. And it worked. They stopped. They hesitated. They saw this big alpha male wolf staring at them. Perhaps from their perspective, who can say what they were thinking, but perhaps it was something like, why isn't this guy running away? Why isn't this guy terrified of us? Why doesn't this guy have a tucked tail? why is he so confident about this situation? I don't think they liked that. They were kind of thrown off balance by that. And it worked perfectly. They turned around and left. And then he just trotted to the north, joined 42 and the family, and just another day in the life of 21. So I thought about that a lot. And there's kind of a part two to that story. I forget how long after it happened, but I was working one day. I was in my park ranger uniform in Lamar Valley. And I was minding my own business in a parking lot. And a car sped into the lot at a pretty fast pace, a little bit fast to be normal. And a mother jumped out. Her daughter came out who looked like maybe she was 8 years old, and they were close to hysterical. And she told me that some strange guy had been yelling at them, screaming at them. He was in some kind of a road rage. He was trying to drive them off the road, and he was following them to this lot. And sure enough, this car sped into the lot. I thought of what 21 had done in that incident that we just spoke about. So I told the mother and the daughter to get behind me. The guy jumped out, and I did pretty much the same thing that 21 did. I just looked the guy in the eye with as calm a look and demeanor as I could. He went a few more paces toward me and the women, and then suddenly slowed down. He hesitated. He looked at them. He looked at me, and it worked. He turned around, got in his car, and just drove off, and that was the end of it. So I tried 21's technique of not trying to be some tough guy of yelling or screaming or whatever, just standing my ground, and it worked pretty well.
So that's so powerful. It's such a great story. And it's, it harkens me back to the very beginning of the book. You kind of begin the reign of Wolf 21 with the end of the story. And you tell a little bit of a tale about a friend of yours that went up to looking for 21. And the friend says something like, I'm paraphrasing here, I wish I could find a man like 21. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's the loyalty and the courage and that calm confidence that 21 brought his whole family with, and displayed that confidence in taking care of 42 and all of his offspring. So with that, I guess I'd like to end our short, I wish I could talk longer. I love your stories. What would you like to tell Coloradans? As you know, we just had an election. We elected the wolf back to Colorado. And what would you like to leave Coloradans with? What should they know? What's the most important thing that they should know about wolves when we do restore wolves to Colorado?
Lori, there's so much to say in that. First of all, I'll mention briefly that I did live in Colorado a while. When I was working on an earlier book, I stayed with my cousin in Fort Collins and did a lot of research at Colorado State. So I have a lot of fond memories of Colorado. Been there a lot. Back then, there was an earlier attempt to get a reintroduction going. Didn't quite work. That was the early 90s. And I am on the advisory board for this current program, which of course has succeeded through the referendum. I think everyone that's listening to us is well aware that the gray wolf was very much a native animal in Colorado, but they were deliberately killed off by the federal government, just like the park rangers here in Yellowstone killed off the original wolves. So it was really a tragedy, if we just stay on the subject of Colorado, that a native animal was hated so much that the government instituted a program to kill them off. It just wasn't the right thing to do. And certainly the right thing to do was to figure out how to restore them. So I'm really pleased with the fact that it passed by such a significant margin. And we've proven here in the Yellowstone area and then also in Idaho that these reintroductions can work really well. If you get the right wild wolves, you bring them in the right way and in sense of a family group, get them acclimated to the area so they feel that they have a new home. The people that made the decisions and how to work out the details here, including Mike Phillips and Doug Smith and many other people, so many heroic folks that were involved. We laid the template here for figuring out how to work it out. My understanding is that the prey population of elk and deer in Colorado is very high right now, so there's plenty for wolves to eat. One of my friends is Carter Niemeyer, who is an expert at working with ranchers and farmers and how to properly protect their livestock, what to do if there are problems. There are ways of dealing with wolves when there are issues that come up. Throughout the West, where there are wolves now, those complications are very low level. They happen, but certainly it's the proper thing to do to help landowners to deal with problems when they come up. So there are proven methods of doing that. We found here in our area that it's been a boom for tourism. One estimate is right now, maybe having wolves in the Yellowstone area is adding $65 million to the local economy. It's created a lot of jobs for people that are taking people out to see wolves. So it's been a huge success. And I feel very confident that things will work out in Colorado in the long run just as well. So it's a great story, particularly that it was done through the referendum. So I'm proud of Colorado as a former resident.
Oh boy, thank you, Rick. We're proud of all ourselves, and I think McKaylee wants us to open up to Q&A.
I do and I don't, because again, like Dalia, I feel like I could listen to your stories for so long, Rick, but I guess that's why you wrote a book, wrote several books, which you guys, if you haven't gotten your copy, you can get your copy at tatteredcover.com today of The Reign of Wolf 21. But yes, we would love to open it up to questions from our audience members. A lot of you, again, have already been so active in the chat, even saying hello to one another, which I've been loving. So if you have any questions for Rick about his book, about his work, I'm sure Dalia would also be happy to talk about the Sierra Club as well, if there's anything there, or she can add her thoughts having read the book so deeply. So feel free to jump in with your questions. I think this is a really good one to start. How do you decide which wolves you're going to write about? Seems like a basic question, but it might have a more complicated answer.
Well, that's interesting. Now that I think about it, I don't know that anyone ever asked me that before. So give that person a point. Well, many of you know that I started working in Yellowstone the year before the wolves arrived. That was 1994. And also many of you know that we never really expected the wolves would be very visible. It turned out that they were. So beginning in the spring of 95, just after they were released, I started to see them all the time. And initially it was the Crystal Creek Pack, which had 6 members. And at a certain point, I began to realize that there was one wolf in the family that was different than the others. That was Wolf Ape. And he was different in several ways that really weren't so good as far as he was concerned. He was the runt of the litter. So of the 6 wolves, 2 were the parents, and then there were 3 initially pups. At that time, they were about 12 months old, so I'll call them yearlings. He was the runt of the litter. He had been picked on a lot by his bigger brothers. He was different not only in that he was the smallest, but his 3 brothers all had beautiful black, sleek, shiny coats. He had this dull gray coat. And so not only was he small, but his coat made him look like a coyote, which is kind of the worst thing if you're a wolf, especially a young one. So he really had a pretty rough life. And I guess I'm kind of oriented for rooting for the underdog, for the especially the kid that doesn't seem to be doing well, the kid that looks different, the kid that's picked on. And so I just paid special attention to him. Now, many of your folks may know that my first book, he is the main character. That's called The Rise of Wolf Ape. And the turning point in his life was a very dramatic moment that caused me to think, okay, this guy is really going to become an important wolf later on, despite his background. So he was out with two of his three brothers one day, and they were just fooling around, and suddenly they ran into a stand of trees. I couldn't really see exactly what was happening in there, but I could see animals running back and forth. And then one of the black brothers, one of the bigger brothers, ran out with an elk calf in his jaws. Then the second black brother ran out, and then last, as always, was little number 8. So now I was pretty impressed with these three brothers that they had made a kill on their own. That was a pretty big deal. But it turned out that wasn't the story, because another animal ran out of the trees, and it was a grizzly bear. And it was the grizzly bear's elk calf. So the brothers had stolen it from him, the bear. And the big problem now was that 8 was the slowest of the brothers. So he was last in line, and the bear was gaining on 8, getting closer and closer, and about to get him, excuse me. And then what happened a moment later changed everything. The little wolf stopped, turned around, and stood up to the grizzly bear. And as far as I could tell, this grizzly bear was just flummoxed by this. He didn't understand, why would such a little guy do this to such a big guy like me? And so the bear just kind of stood there trying to understand this. And by that time, the two other wolves with the calf had gone out of sight. So looking past 8, the bear couldn't see where they had gone. So he just kind of gave up and turned around and left. But his brothers never saw what 8 had done that day, never realized that he was the one that saved him. I was the only one that saw that. And so that was the reason I thought, okay, I think this guy, after all, is going to become a pretty important wolf. And it turned out I was exactly right. So he had this great life story. It was a story very different than number 21. Some of the folks in the meeting may already know part of the story, that 21's father was illegally shot and killed the day he was born. And 6 months later, 8 came along, joined the family as the new alpha male, and adopted and raised 21 and his 7 siblings. So that's part of the story too. So he was the mentor, he was the, let's say, the stepfather, the adopted father of 21. So 21 became this great hero, but he never would have been the wolf that he became without the serving the apprenticeship under Wolf 21. I do a lot of talks for kids, and I sometimes say, well, there's another character you folks may know about whose father died when he was very young, was adopted by just an average, ordinary guy who happened to be a farmer in Texas. And they say, well, who was that? And then there's always a kid that realizes who I'm talking about. And that, of course, was Superman, who was raised by Jonathan Kent on a farm in Kansas. So
I was
21
actually thinking of Simba. I'm not gonna lie. It took me like Simba from The Lion King. That's what I was thinking of.
Okay, we'll give you a half a point for that.
I don't need one. That was lame. It's okay.
But 21 exhibited that same courage that 8 exhibited at that grizzly bear when he turned around, when 42 and the pups had gotten away, and he turned around and faced that pack that was after him. So, I think that maybe some of that courage and that bravery rubbed off from 8 onto 21.
Absolutely.
Well, if I can tell you one more story about their relationship, which is probably one of the most decisive moments in Yellowstone wolf history. There was during that time when 21 was probably about a year old, he was out with his brothers and sisters and 8. This was at Sioux Creek. A rival pack came on the scene and charged at the family. And out in front was the original Druid alpha male 38, who was a very violent, very large, very dominating male. He had actually previously killed Eight's father. And so now 38 was leading the charge down at Eight's family. Eight stared uphill at the ridge where the Druid wolves were charging down with Eight out in front, with 38 out in front. And he was standing in front of 21 and the other yearlings, and without any hesitation, Eight charged uphill. He engaged 38, a wolf that was much older, much bigger, much stronger, infinitely better fighter. Again, the wolf that had killed his own father. I was with a group of park visitors, and I felt I had to prepare them for what we were about to see. So I explained to them if two alpha males fight, and there's a really significant difference in the size and the fighting ability between the two, the fight is going to be over in just a few moments, with the winning wolf standing over the defeated one, standing over the throat, and the way that one wolf kills another, the killing bite is in the throat. So I had to prepare him for seeing the death of Eight. The two gray wolves charged into each other. They started to rustle on the ground because they were both the same color. We couldn't tell exactly what was happening. And then, just as I expected, within a few seconds, it was over, with the winner standing over the loser. But Eight somehow figured out how to win the fight. So all he had to do was reach down, tear the throat out of the guy that had killed his father. But instead he stepped away and let him go. So 21 witnessed that. And I think it had a huge impact on his life. I already mentioned that 21 never lost a fight with another wolf, another rival. But every time he won a fight, he always let the guy go, just like his adopted father had demonstrated.
Wow. Wow. And I love how they interweave and how they connect, and they make appearances in each other's stories. It's so wonderful. I have one question here that people might actually be interested in. This may be a silly question, but how are the wolves numbered? Are they assigned as they are born? How does that work?
Sure, that's a good question. We get it all the time. All of the original wolves brought down from Canada, the two batches in 95 and 96, were assigned numbers. There was never a number one, so we started with number two. And then once the wolves were established and started having pups, every winter, Doug Smith and his crew, as they operate the Wolf Project here, they dart and collar new wolves. So whichever is the next wolf to be collared, it gets the next number. Nowadays, Wyoming Fish and Game, they use our numbering system as well. So it's pretty widespread. That's why I think now we're up into the 1200s. We have not collared that many wolves in Yellowstone, only a fraction of that. So every year we collar them. And I've oftentimes had the thought that if you're a young male wolf and you kind of have this hero worship of your father, the big, gigantic, strong, masculine alpha male, like most human boys, they want to be just like their dads. And in addition to the alpha male being so much bigger and stronger than the pup would be, the male pup, they notice that there's one other difference between them. The alpha male has this thing around his neck, and that must designate that he's a big shot in life. And then one day, perhaps the young son has this experience where some giant bird in the sky chases him. He feels a little pain in his rear end. He goes to sleep for a while, and then he wakes up, and suddenly now he's a big shot too, because he has one of those things around his neck. So that's a great story.
I like the idea of that. It's almost like a crowning or a passing on the torch or something like that for them. So I hate the idea of this even being close to the end here, but we like to end on this question here on our live streams because it always produces some amazing answers, and it applies to both of you. But what did this book teach you? Dalia, either as a reader, something fun fact you want to share. Same with you, Rick, as yourself as a writer, some story that you just have to tell us before the end. But what did this book teach you? Dalia, I'd love to start with you and then end with our author of the hour.
Oh, gee, it taught me how incredibly alike humans are with their wolves. It taught me that we have so much in common, so much that the same values. We value family. We value loyalty. Boy, uh, and that makes me really emotional.
That's a great answer. How about for you, Rick?
Boy, that's a profound question. Thank you for asking that. I guess some of my initial thoughts are, it's taught me a lot about the importance of loyalty, the importance of respect for each other, the importance of working together, the importance of understanding your responsibilities and carrying them out even when it's difficult. So I think the way that 21 understood his life, but we haven't talked about the point that he was definitely not the top wolf in his family. He totally accepted the fact that the boss in the wolf family, the true leader of the pack, was not at all him. It was 42. He was fine with that. He just worked for the queen. He was the employee. And her job was to make all the big decisions, where to den, how to raise the pups, where to move them, how to organize everything. She was the boss of the operation. His responsibilities were to protect the family from rival wolves and to do the main job of hunting and feeding them. Those jobs were easy for him. To organize things, get everyone to work together, that would have been very difficult for him. So I think that was the most important part of the relationship. They worked so perfectly as a team. And so you think of a human family, a human organization, something like the Sierra Club, people that work in a bookstore, whatever you want to say, the importance of respect, of loyalty, of working together, understanding what each person's responsibility is, to have some understanding of the person that makes the big decisions. Sometimes those decisions are hard, but you go along with it. And so it worked perfectly in that family. Now, I think 21's attitude was he was so thankful to have 42 because she was such a great leader that it made his life so much easier. After the death of 40, when she was gone, boy, he had a great time in life. But one of my favorite stories that kind of illustrates that is always a funny story to tell. One day, all of them were sleeping. They like to sleep in the afternoon, which is a good plan, I think. And 21 got up first, and he wanted to lead a hunt to the east. So this big shot alpha male, the toughest wolf in the known world, trotted off to the east. He stopped, he looked over his shoulder. Everyone was ignoring him. So he went back, he lay down again, he got up again. He went east 8 times. None of that worked. The moment that 42 got up and she wanted to lead a hunt in the opposite direction, everyone followed her. 21 figuratively kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Okay, I guess we're going to go the other way."
Of course.
So
Of course.
that's the way they went. Yeah. And but the thing I just want to emphasize so much, biggest, toughest, strongest, best fighting wolf we had, heavyweight champion, he was totally fine with that arrangement. And so it says a lot about the advancement of wolf society that long before we figured out how to do it, they understood, well, I think what we need to do is to have the females in charge here. That's probably our best bet.
I love that. It reminds me of that saying that the man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn him any way she wants.
Yeah,
That's great. That's
yeah,
great.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
I love seeing that in this example. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah. Well, Doug Smith is famous for a saying too that kind of goes along that line. I'm sure you've heard it before. He certainly practiced it. Happy wife, happy life.
Mm.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, I cannot thank you enough Rick and Dalia. I on behalf of everyone here watching and us at Tattered Cover, we want to thank you guys so much. And once again, you guys can order your copy of The Reign of Wolf 21 and The Rise of Wolf 8 at tatteredcover.com. Dalia and Rick, I want to give you each a chance just to have a last minute moment, remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and anything else you want to say before we close out. Dalia, if you'll start us off.
I'm Delia Malone. I'm the wildlife chair for the Colorado chapter of the Sierra Club. Please look us up online, Colorado chapter of the Sierra Club. And I want to say thank you to Rick, and I'm going to ask the audience to give a big thank you to Rick by giving him a big howl. Ow!
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Well, I'm not very technologically oriented, so I don't really have a presence on the internet, but I'm easy to find in Yellowstone. I'm out every day. This morning, I spent the day watching the Junction Butte Pack at Slough Creek. We got to see a mating this morning. We got to see them kill a bison, so it was an exciting day. I'm pretty easy to find, especially this time of the year. And if I can take just one more moment to mention, we've talked about Wolf 302. So my book on 302 is finished. It will be out this fall. It's called The Redemption of Wolf 302. It's about how he turned his life around and became a pretty good guy at the very end. So it's a hopeful book. And then right now we're working on a fourth book, which I think the two of you will be pleased to hear about. It probably will be called Alpha Female. So it's all about the great alpha females that we've had over the years. And the main character is a wolf that you may have heard about, the 06 female. So that will be coming up after the 302 book. And I think you'll find a lot of cool stuff in that about why females rule the roost.
Wonderful.
Sounds fabulous.
Wait for it. Well, and I mean, hey, you guys can pre-order the next book as
Right.
well. So when that gets done, just again, you can visit us at any of our locations in the Denver metro area or go online at tatteredcover.com. The links are down in the description below to get the books as well. So it's easy access for you guys. Once again, I'm McKaylee from Tattered Cover Bookstore. Thank you guys again for shopping local, supporting local businesses, and keeping us open for 50 years. We really cannot tell you how much we appreciate it this year and all the years past. So thank you guys again. Rick and Dalia, if you'll stay around while I close this out here. Once
Thank you,
again,
McKaylee.
once again, order your copies of The Reign of Wolf 21 at tattercover.com. Stay safe, everybody, and happy reading. Bye, all.
Bye.